Taralynn, and I'm from Muscopeding First Nation and live in Regina, Saskatchewan. It was good. I don't know. My needs seem to always be met, like in the core area here, because there's um, all these different agencies in four directions, so everything is here. Um, Everybody is always helpful and ready to assist with someone who needs help, so I think it was fairly good. I'd probably have to say my life, from being young and leaving home early and getting into drugs and experiencing all of that stuff and domestic violence, bad relationships, to now attending FNU for Indigenous social work, and I have all my kids and living sober and getting involved with the Sweat Lodge and the elders, Archie Weenie, and yeah. I would have to say the community supports from here and Tanya and Archie Weenie, the elder, and um, just helping me and being there for support. And when I would wander off and get back into the drugs or the alcohol and practice again, I would steer away from the lodge and the ceremonies, and but they'd always be there when I'm ready to pick it back up and be sober again, and yeah. The supports that I built for myself um, with coming off of the drugs and leaving the streets, and my culture, my ceremonies, and that's what I run to when I need help. Babies, kids. I meditate and the Sweat Lodge, take my kids to the Sweat Lodge and um, stay away from drugs and alcohol, and my friends that are still practicing, and yeah. I think it's very important because if I didn't have my culture or the ceremonies or the Sweat Lodge, the elders, um, and their help, the prayers and stuff, I don't think I would be here. I think I'd be gone already. My strength comes from prayer and ceremony and Sweat Lodge and my babies. So continuing to do that, staying focused and staying with positive people, my community, and volunteering and giving back. When I was a baby, I was abandoned by my mother, and my one of her older sisters had taken me in, and I lived with her till I was 3 years old, and her name was Irene, and we lived on Ochapowace. Some of my siblings grew up with my grandparents and siblings of my mother, her brothers and sisters. When I was 3, I was put into Muskowgan boarding school. She was telling me, okay, I'm leaving you here. You got to stay. And she grabbed my one little bag. And I remember screaming and crying because I didn't want her to go. And this lady took me by the hand and took me upstairs and took me into this one room. It was the junior dorm. And there was a bunch of beds. They were like white little metal beds with little foams on them. They weren't proper mattresses. White sheets and a wool blanket, and we got a pillow. I got a number. I was number 43, and that's what I was called by. And I later found out why my brother didn't come say hi when I was so excited when I saw him on the playground. It's because we weren't allowed to communicate. I wasn't allowed to talk to my siblings that were there. My older sister was there. She was in the next dorm up to me, um, in the intermediate dorm, and I wasn't even allowed to have contact with her. And um, I guess that would be my first. Well, I shouldn't say my first abandonment feeling because I think the first one would have been from my mother leaving me, but I was too small to know how that felt. Um, and then when my auntie left me at the boarding school, and I stayed there till I was 8. Um, I liked it there. It was okay, I guess. I got used of it. I was in figure skating and church choir, and the nuns at the church really liked me, and I was, I guess, one of the favorites. Hung around with one of them, and I didn't get in trouble like the other kids did. I wasn't picked on, I suppose, as much as they were because they liked me, which kind of caused a little bit of animosity between the other kids because they knew I was liked and I didn't get in trouble, and so I would get beat up from them on the playground and stuff. Running away, we tried to run away. Passing notes in school is how me and my siblings communicated. And we got this little plan to run away from there and go to Cookham's on Gordon's. And it was late at night, and we snuck out, and we got out of the building, and we got up to the pavement before we got caught in the ditch, and we got taken back, and we got lickings for that. It's what I had to go through at that time. Um, when I was 8 years old, when I left, my biological mother actually to the came to the residential place, Muskowgan Residential School, and I never saw her before. Um, and the last time I saw her was when she left me alone when I was 2 months old, when my auntie found me. And so this is 8 years old when I'm seeing her for the first time again. And I immediately knew who she was. She ended up pulling me and my siblings out of there. And so we left. That's how we got out of the school. Um, I went running up to her immediately and I gave her a big hug and I just started crying because I just knew in my heart that that was my mom. And it was. So I was all excited thinking, a new life, it's going to be great. My mom loves me and she's here, and my sibling and um, my brother went back to my grandma's, went to my grandma's on the reserve, and I stayed in the city with her. So that was change, I guess, when we came back to the city. The city was new, it was big, it was exciting. Um, I felt really happy to be here and with my mom. But then she, like, not even, it wasn't even a day later, I think it was even the same night, she started drinking. And that's when I knew what alcohol was. And her boyfriend at the time, I suppose would be my stepdad, um, did drugs. And yeah, so that was my life for, I guess, the next 20 years. My mom partied a lot. She was an alcoholic. Um, she drank every day. She was very miserable. Um, threatened suicide a lot. Um, she would torment me and tell me she's going to kill herself if I didn't sit up with her. When I was 10, so 2 years into living with my mom, I was sexually abused by one of my sister's boyfriends, and at my mom's party, and he held a pillow over my face, and I was screaming my face off and kicking, and nobody heard me. And my brothers were downstairs. My sister was passed out in the living room. My mom was passed out sitting on a chair, and yeah, he did what he did, and then he left. And the next morning, I didn't know what to do. I was scared and stuff, and had a bath and was just scrubbing myself because I felt really dirty, and I was just scrubbing and scrubbing, and my sister comes in and she was like, what are you doing? What's going on? And I was like, nothing, nothing. I didn't want to tell her. I was scared. And then she was like, tell me what's wrong. And she knew something was wrong. And so I told her. And then she started screaming and went running out of the house. And my mom was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And my sister told my mom, and I got kicked out because I was a whore and I was a slut and I asked for it. And I didn't even know what the hell was going on. So I left because I didn't know what to do, and they were kicking me out and yelling and freaking out, and I was scared because my sister was going to beat me up. And I was walking around the hood here, and yeah, met up with some friends and from school, and they took me home. And I guess that's when my street life first started. Every time they got drunk, I'd get beat up and I'd get picked on because of what happened. Um, and my relationship has never, ever been good after that with my sister or my mom. And yeah, when I was 12, I started prostitution because, well, when I was 10 was when I was first kicked out and stuff. And so I kind of knew, I kind of got to know the streets and got to know where to go and, stuff like that, who would help me, who's not going to help. And you learn that quick. You pick up on that stuff. And started drinking myself, started doing drugs, started off with weed and oil, um, and then it just went went from that to cocaine to opiates to methadone. It just grew and grew and grew. My addiction. We would write her letters, and I would write her apology letters, and I would put them in the mailbox because I knew she'd always check the mail. So I knew she'd get these letters that I'd be staying at my friend's, but I'd write a letter and beg and ask to come home or whatever and put them in the mailbox, and then I'd call after because I knew she'd get the letter, right? And testing the water to see if I'm good to go. I didn't know my dad. I didn't even know my dad existed at this time. Yeah, so I stayed on the streets and now I'm 14 and I get pregnant on my first baby. When my baby was 1 month old, um, it was like 3 in the morning and I'm tired. I'm already in bed, but she's drinking. She has about 6 people in the house and me and my baby are sleeping and she gets everybody up, like her friends, and brings them into my bedroom, turns on the light, and picks up my child. And I start freaking out, right? Because she's like, oh, look at my grandbaby. And she's trying to pass my baby to this drunk that I don't even know, never met him in my life, and oh, and so cute. And I'm like, what the fuck? Get the fuck out of here. I don't want these rubby ass people touching my baby and putting their hands on, like, get the hell out of here. And I was so mad. And she ended up slapping me across the face. And I pushed her and she grabbed me. And I guess that was the first time we fought. We were scuffling and I was trying to like drag her out of my room. And I managed to get her out of my room. And then somehow we managed to be in the bathroom. I don't know how we got into the bathroom, but she has me by my hair. Yeah, and I grabbed my kid and wrapped him up, had a moss bag for him, and wrapped him up in his blanket, in his moss bag, and I packed a diaper bag and we left. And I went walking down, and this is like 3 in the morning, and I'm walking with a 1 month old newborn and howling down the street. And I'm 14, and I don't have any supports, don't have family, don't have nowhere to go. And my sister kept me for 3 days, but she was into IV drugs, and I guess that's when I started getting into it because I stayed with her for like those 3 days, and while those 3 days I was there, she was using, and I ended up, like, she ended up sticking the needle in my arm, and her and my cousin, and holding me down because I told them I was gonna tell. I'm gonna tell on you, and yeah, so they held me down and gave me a shot, and I liked it. I liked the feeling that it gave me, and it just made me numb, I guess. I heard ringing in my ears, and I just went so calm. And she ends up phoning welfare on us because she's mad. She's mad that I'm at my sister's, and she thinks my sister's being a traitor. There's Our relationships were so messed up. And I went to my son's dad's house, and I didn't have the kid now because he just got apprehended, and I was crying and upset, and they were welcoming and let me in and let me stay. And so I stayed there for a bit until Val come and got me and apologized and said sorry, and I went back to my mom's house. Um, my son wasn't even 3 months old yet, and I got pregnant again. And this pregnancy, I was in my addictions. I started needles. My pregnancy, my daughter was born addicted, and she was addicted to opiates and stuff like that because I was using throughout the pregnancy. And yeah, so she was born, and they thought she might have a little bit of Down syndrome and stuff because of the way her features were, and her being addicted. In the third month, when I'm planning to bring this child home, and the nurses are talking to me like I'm bringing this kid home, right? So I'm getting things planned and, trying to figure out where the hell I'm going to stay. And I'm staying with the kid's dad and my kid's dad. And they're like, yeah, yeah, we can bring her home and this and that. And then a social worker comes in and tells me, no, you're not taking this kid home. And I got upset and I left the hospital and I never went back, never looked back. And she went into the same foster home. I got a letter in the mail saying that she went into the same foster home as the one that my son was in. When I was 16, um, I got um, I got slapped in the face from my mom. I was trying to be sober. I'm trying to work on getting my kids back and living in my mother's house with her drinking every day. Now they're all getting ready to go to the bar. And they have two 24s. And they tell me to put them in the fridge, put one in my mom's room. Okay, so I do that. And they're like, we're going to the bar and we're going to be back after the bar closes and we'll have these when we come back. I'm like, okay. I left. And after they left, I went to the store. I left to the store and I went to the Max. And I bought a Slurpee and a bag of chips. And my plan was to go home and veg out on the couch and watch TV. We only had, what, three little channels. And the 10 minutes that I was gone to the store, somebody broke into our house and took those two fours. I think I thought it was one of her buddies because who else would have known. Um so now I'm calling the JRs trying to call her, right? And they let me talk to her and oh my god, I tell her what happened and she's just freaking out. She's freaking out over this alcohol and I'm coming home and I'm gonna punch you out and oh my god. Yeah, she comes in with all of her friends and I tell her what happened and she like gets up and I'm sitting on the chair and she like kicks me in the stomach and then she like slaps me in the face really hard and I'm just sitting there and I didn't even fight back. I just sat there and started crying and her friends were like, "Holy Val, settle down." And I went into my bedroom and I was crying and upset and she's, "You're not allowed to leave this effing house. Get into that room, you whore," and oh God, and whatever it was. And so I went into the room and I stayed there for a little bit and I started thinking, I'm useless. I'm no good. Nobody wants me. Have no reason to live. Can't keep my kids. So I go downstairs and I grab a rope and I tie it around the beam and I was hanging myself or attempting to hang myself, and I was done. I was just so sick and tired of everything not being wanted, life, I guess. And So I was like trying to hang myself, and my uncle comes down the stairs, and I'm like dangling and kicking and like trying to trying to cough, and because this rope is tight. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing, you stupid fuck?" And he like comes and cuts me down, and he tells my mom, and then she starts freaking out. She was such a drama queen for attention, I think. And calls the hospital and whatever. So I get sent to they come get me, and I get sent to the emergency, and they're talking to me, and I'm telling them what's, this is what's happening, and this is how I feel. And they end up admitting me into the hospital, and I ended up leaving because they're trying to make me take these pills, different kinds of pills, and I never didn't take don't take medicines. And so I didn't want these pills. Plus my mom always like drilled it in my head to not take medication because it's she always said we were getting poisoned or something, or it wasn't good for us, and we weren't allowed to take it. So I was scared to take these pills that they were giving me, and I ended up sneaking out of my room and getting out of the psych ward and running away. And all, I didn't even have my clothes because they took my clothes and my shoes and stuff. And so I was in my night in that hospital gown and that robe thing, and I was picked up like 10 blocks away from the hospital by the police, and they took me back, and then I was held there against my will. And then I was forced to take those medications that they were giving me. They put an IV in, and that's how they were giving me, administering those medications. And holy Hannah, did I ever feel like one of those chimpanzees that just get flooded with medication testing out because they tried like 30 different types of antidepressants on me, and they like would make me feel so weird. Some would just have me like shaken. Some would have me like extremely paranoid and freaked right out. And they were just like, it felt like they were just testing, and I'd getting mad. And I was like, I don't want this stuff. And, but they were doing it anyways. I didn't have a say because the police brought me there because I ran away, and I had to be there for 72 hours. Went back home. And my mom's promising to stay sober and not do that anymore, and she's promising to help me get my kids back. And she wants to be living right, her too. And yeah, another kid comes along, and I end up getting pregnant, and another kid comes along, and I got my kids back at this time, and I'm happy. And 17, and just waiting. I just waiting to turn 18 to get my own house and apply for social services. Um, that's what I looked forward to, and when I look back at that, I think, God, why was I excited to like jump on welfare? I why didn't I want to work? But because I like grew up the way I did, I think, and I didn't have anybody to show me who was working, I didn't know. So, um, but now I wish I knew. I wish I knew what I know now then. So, anyways, this old man shows up at my doorstep, and I knock at the door, and I open the door, and I'm kind of like, I didn't know him. Like, I was like, I think you got the wrong address. And he's like, Taralynn. And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, I'm your dad. I said, I'm Larry Anaquad. And I was like, oh, okay. What do you want? Like, I didn't know. And then he was like, well, um, you got coffee on? And I was like, yeah. So he sat down, and he invited his wife in, and they talked to me and they kind of said sorry for not being there. Um, they said they were always there. I just didn't know. And they tried to, um, they tried to, have contact with me. They tried to be involved, but my mom wouldn't allow it. And I can see that being truth. I can't see my dad being a liar. I don't really know who he was, but from what I know, and what he tells me, I believe it's truth because of who he is. He was a very traditional and spiritual man, so he just I just believed what he said. But I was also timid and scared because I didn't know them. I didn't know. They seemed white to me. My dad's wife was a teacher. She is a teacher, and coming from the res and drinking and how I came about, and when they come, they're very dressed nice and look nice and driving a nice vehicle, and like they're like they like white people. I don't know. Like, they got jobs and shit. You didn't see that where I grew up and stuff like that. So I was just kind of like, I didn't know what to think. I thought, like, I didn't fit, but that's my dad. I didn't fit um, because I was so rugged, so raunchy, I guess, or that's how I felt. uh, that's how I felt. I wasn't like that, but I guess that's how I felt about myself because of the way I lived and stuff. And when I saw my dad and his wife, and I just felt like it just didn't fit. Like I didn't belong. How come nobody told me? Like, how come no one ever told me about this before? How come I'm only meeting him now when I'm 18 years old? Like, you know? But my older aunties and cousins and stuff like that, and grandmas had told me his, like, yeah, he did try, and he would buy clothes and send them, and she would throw them away, give them away, or she didn't want him to have any contact with me at all. um but I called him when I needed him, and every time I called him, he was always there. Him and his wife ended up marrying this guy, and turned out to be a very bad idea. So my little girl was born, and life is good, and I get my first car, and I'm sober, and this is my second home, and my kids are home with me, and life seems to be good. I got this good, hardworking man who was also an alcoholic. He drank a 40 a day of Gibson's finest, and yeah. So, but I wasn't drinking then, or doing drugs. I was doing drug screens and stuff like that for the ministry because I had my kids back. I was going to school. Kids were in daycare, and then all of a sudden one day social services shows up at my house and they're apprehending my kids. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, why are you guys here? What do you like? My drug screens are clean. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Cops were behind them, and they were there to arrest my husband. And he sexually molested our babysitter, apparently. And yeah, so they arrested him and they took my kids. They apprehended my children. He was released from jail, I guess, like that evening, and came back to my house, and I got him to pack up his shit and get out. And this was like We got married May 19th. May 19th in '06, and May, June, July. By August, he was all that stuff happened in August. Welfare showed up to our house and apprehended the kids. And in December, I started using again. I started drinking. I was like, fuck this. Why do I need to stay sober? I have nothing to stay sober for. I quit school. My kids they're not in daycare. They're in welfare now. I don't have my husband. My mom is being the way she's being, and I didn't even have a friend. I didn't have one fucking friend to call or lean on. I had nowhere to go, and I didn't know what to do. So I did what I knew, and that was prostitution, street life, and addictions. My addictions. I was pregnant, and I had a little boy, and he got taken away right away. The ministry takes my kids long term, so I'm getting a lawyer and stuff like this, and having visits with all these kids, these three over here and this one over here, and still in my addiction, still drinking, and back into the IV drug use, heavy, heavy, heavy. I got into morphine and opiates and stuff like that, and um, because I just felt like I didn't have a hope or a pot to shit in, and that's all I knew. That was my comfort. That was my numbing from the feelings I had to feel, cuz I didn't want to feel that abandonment, that lost loneliness feeling that I was going through. So the drugs were my escape. I was in this group. I was in this little it was all nations healing through arts program, and they did hip hop, and they did art stuff like painting, and they did different little activities, and it was for youth who were high risk, and it was an evening program, and I joined it to keep busy in the evenings because that's when I wanted to be on stroll, was in the evenings and when I get bored and stuff, right? So I joined this program to help keep me busy, to not want to think about that stuff, right? Because even though I knew this woman was helping me and stuff, I didn't want to bring that shit into her home. Like I still had, respect for people, even though I was in my shit and on drugs. I wouldn't, I wouldn't cross that line to hurt somebody or, bring that stuff into their home. And I didn't want to. So I was really trying to be right and live right. And I was in this program, and that's where I met my sweetheart. I guess you can call him that. um, and yeah, and so we're there, and we're doing these acting skits, and we had to do this skit together, this little script, and act act out, and we are doing this scene together, and that's how we met. And I was telling him, yeah, I'm working here and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to come see you tomorrow. So he came and saw me the next day, and well, we haven't been apart since. And, all my supports that who were helping me stay sober didn't want me with this guy because he was in the halfway house. Just coming from the pen, getting out from the pen. But he was in a halfway house, and he had to stay sober too, and he was coming from the penitentiary, and he was telling me his story, and we were getting to know each other while he was in Oscana. And he was there for a bit, and so we were sober together and going to meetings and going to stuff, and I told him my story, and he's like, let's do it. Let's stay sober. Let's get those kids back. let's do this. And I'm like, okay, I found somebody who wants to do this and wants to have goals and wants to have a life and make a life with me. So we um, started dating, and and we were sober, and I got my kids back. I had to come off the methadone though, because I was on the methadone. Oh, and that's what my boyfriend didn't like. He didn't like me on that shit, and he was like, "Get off of that stuff. It's nasty and gross, and they're just making a profit off of you." And and so I was like, "Okay, well." I didn't know how. I went to the doctor and I tried to get him to lower me, and would get mad and tell me no, he's not lowering me. And he would always, every time I'd go see him, like, because you'd have to see him once a week, right? You'd have to do a urine screen and go see your doctor and stuff like that. And so um, every week he would raise me, and I'm like, getting really rank on this shit and trying to work and trying to do what I was doing, and I'd be like just nodding out, and just it wasn't good for me in the work placement on that stuff. And so I took one of the ladies there, because I tried like 4 times to ask him to go to lower me, and he wouldn't. And I was telling them like that he won't, and this is what he's doing. And then she was like, "Well, what if you take somebody in there with you?" And I was like, "Well, why don't you come? Huh? Why don't you come?" And so I took her in there, and um the doctor got was like shocked that we I actually took her in. And her name was Charlene. And took her into the doctors, and she was like, "No, you need to lower this girl." And she was aggressive with the doctor and quite demanding, and he listened to her. He um he he immediately lowered me my dose that day and wrote me a prescription, and I went and got it. So yeah, it was good. And every week he would lower me 3 after that. And that's how I eventually got off of that. When I got down to 12 milligrams, I just didn't even go back. I just stayed off of it, but it was still really rough with the aching legs and the aching bones and the not so nice diarrhea and sweats, like just soaking my clothes, and I'd just be just soaked, and like somebody just come and pour a jug of water all over you. And it was ugly. It was like that for like 3 months. And then I met Sherry. um Sherry began working where I was volunteering at swap. And that's how I got involved with my culture again. It was through Sherry, um, Sweat Lodge and prayer, and just sharing stories, and her telling me what she was doing. And telling me to go back to my culture and start healing myself, and start taking care of um, myself, and most importantly, forgive myself and forgive my mom and my sister, and for what they done. Um, and she said, you don't necessarily have to go and tell them in person. You can write a letter and burn it. And that's what I did. I wrote a letter to my mother, and I wrote a letter to my sister, and I wrote a letter to myself when I was a little girl. And I took it into the sweat lodge, and I took tobacco and cloth, and took my letters in, prayed and smudged for them. And And then, I went through that process. And when I was done to sweat, I went outside and I took some time for myself and, was talking to myself and my grandfather's. And I put those letters in the fire one at a time. And I watched, I watched them crinkle up and I watched them turn black and I watched them break apart. And then they slowly started dwindling with the fire up into the fire and blowing. And to me, that was what I said, being carried and taken, where it needed to be. And I think that was the first huge biggest part, because I had to forgive myself and them for what they done, because I had a lot of resentment and anger towards them, because as I got older I realized what they did was wrong. How they treated me, what they called me was wrong. um, and I had to come to terms with that and accept that stuff, and it was hard. And sometimes it still peaks up, like I'm trying to have a relationship with my sister now, and sometimes it'll peak up, and I just gotta pray and and just give it to the creator. So I got introduced to, Sherry, and I always knew about the my culture, and I knew about the sweat lodge and stuff. I didn't really know too much. I just hearsay and heard what other people say and stuff like that. I went to Archie when I got off the methadone. Archie Weenie, he's an elder in the community here, and asked for prayer and stuff like that, and told him my story, told him where I was coming from and stuff like that, and he did a sweat for us, for my little family, and he gave them he gave my older kids names and myself, and talked to us and tell me that he's always going to be there. He'll always, the sweat lodge and prayer and stuff like that, and to come back, to stick with it and come back. And I had plans to want to do that, and I did stay for a little while, but I got busy with life and moving. I moved out of Regina because my partner got out of the pen, and I was scared to see him. Um, Quite still fearful of him. So now I'm back here, sober, and still have all of my kids, and I'm going to FNU for my Indigenous social work, and I'm doing volunteer work, and I'm working night shifts, and um, life is good today. Um, I got a roof over my head, rent is paid in full, food in my cupboard, and there's nothing more I could ask for. I'm grateful and for what I have today. And Tanya taking me under her wing, and I'm gonna walk beside her and follow this journey, and I'm excited. I'm like, really excited about it, and I feel blessed and honored to be in the presence of Archie and all the people at the lodge, and know that that's love. That's true, pure, honest love that you can get. And my heart, my soul aches for that. And my kids, they're just, when we're there, they they're just like a magnet, you know. It's just, I don't know, it's beautiful and good. And my kids are dancing powwow now. I got them dancing powwow. I got them some outfits. I need to get my oldest one a new outfit because he grew out of the one I did have. And so yeah, slowly getting back into my culture and the lodge, the ceremonies, got my kids dancing. My plan is to eventually be dancing as well. And that's what my dad did, you know, and I want to honor my dad that way and bring my kids under the arbor and dance on Mother Earth and have that pure, true happiness, because that's where it comes from. I believe, I know that's where it comes from.
Way, yeah, way.